Okay, so let's get started. So this session is going to be about big data. As far as I was seeing, the morning sessions could also have been titled Big Data. There was a lot of big data-based social media analytics and so on that we saw in the earlier sessions as well. So big data is pretty ubiquitous. We have three really excellent speakers here today. So let me introduce our first speaker, Dimitri Maex. He is the president of OgilvyOne NY, which is the digital arm of the company. He's on Ogilvy's worldwide board. Dimitri has been doing analytics for a very long time, and he's literally run analytics practices in many places around the world. He started in Brazil, moved to London, and went to Silicon Valley and ran the analytics arm, or rather ran analytics for Cisco as part of Ogilvy's consulting arm. And one interesting thing that I noticed was that he got an MBA unusually from XLRI, the Xavier Labor Relations Institute in India. So I was joking with him that maybe sticking to stereotype, that's where he got his analytics training. Anyway, without further ado, let me ask Dimitri to come and talk to us.
I'm so excited to be here at Yale. I'm for a small-town boy from Belgium, which is where I'm from originally. That's a pretty big deal. I only know Yale from the movies, so it's pretty crazy to be here actually in person. So I'm Dimitri Maex. I am the president of OgilvyOne in New York. OgilvyOne is a digital arm of the Ogilvy network. So I spend my time with clients such as IBM, and you're going to hear more about IBM later, American Express, Nestle, Unilever, sort of big brands. And really now I oversee the entire group, so that includes creative, producers, account management strategists. But I started my career in analytics. In 1997, I joined OgilvyOne in Brussels in analytics. And that was a time when analytics wasn't that popular, to be honest. I was the only analyst in the Brussels office. I was stuck away in a corner. Nobody really wanted to talk to me. Nobody cared talking to me. It was very lonely. And that has really changed because now everybody's talking about data, and data has become sort of the subject that everybody wants to talk about. And analysts are now the rock stars of the marketing world, which is still takes a while to get used to. I actually really, because of that, I've spent my entire life trying to convince people in the marketing world that data is actually interesting and that you can do very, very interesting things with data. And I did that for years, and 2 years ago I decided to write a book about data that actually really tried to demystify data for a non-technical audience. I don't like the term big data. I think it sounds scary. It sounds like something we need to hide from or something that is going to crush us. And it doesn't. I think data is actually, it's a very intimidating subject to many, but it shouldn't be. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to do with this book. And the book is organized by the different chapters, which are really questions that any marketer needs to deal with that can be answered by data. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tackle 3 of those questions very quickly, and then at the end I'm going to show you a case study that sort of brings it all together, and I can also make you cry. So I'm going to try and make you cry. Okay. So the very first question, a very important one, if anybody has ever been in direct marketing knows that targeting is very important, finding the right people to talk to. So who should I talk to is the first question. And that's where data can play a hugely important role, obviously. Marketers have been doing in the direct marketing world a lot of data analysis and segmentation for many years. I'm going to show you the first case study, which is work we did a couple of years ago with one of the biggest retailers in the country. They have about 4,000 stores nationally. And they were sitting on a huge wealth of transactional behavioral data, yet they weren't using it. They were using a very traditional attitudinal segmentation. So what we did with them was we built a segmentation framework that allowed them to really extract the value out of all that transactional data. And it started at the very top with a lifetime value model. This is going to be the most complicated chart I'm going to present. So if you lose me after this chart, you'll be able to pick up afterwards. No problem. The first one was a lifetime value model. So we created a statistical model that looked at the behavior of a household and predicted what they were going to be worth over a number of years. Pretty standard. Okay. The next layer we built was a behavioral segmentation that really tried to uncover what are the behaviors that are driving that value. So is somebody high value because they're buying full price, because they buy very actively but in discounts, because they buy high tickets, because they're very loyal. So we used a lot of average order value, whether they buy in discount or not, the frequency, recency of transactions. So your typical behavioral segmentation that gives a little bit more color behind the value. Okay. Then if you've ever worked at a retailer or with a retailer, you know that most retailers really are driven by the calendar, the retail calendar. And that was for this retailer no different. So they had the big spring season, Father's Day, back to school, and holidays. Those were the big seasons where marketing was really, really concentrated. And we knew that in these different seasons, households behaved very differently as well. So we created separate segmentations for each season. Okay. And then we looked at the products. They had a lot of different product categories, so we built product propensity models that identified the likelihood that a household was going to be interested in each and one of their product categories. And then finally, they had the attitudinal segmentation. That was a segmentation they were actually using before we started working with them. Your traditional retail research-based segmentation that puts the entire country in 9 buckets based on sort of broad psychographics. Okay? So this is sort of the framework we built, and the interesting thing is that every household can be characterized by each and one of these dimensions. Okay, so you can be an active, high-value customer because you buy full price, so don't send them discounts because they buy full price anyway. Spring you're in lawn, Father's Day you're in equipment, etc. You're not interested in apparel, but very much so in appliances and tools, and sort of psychographically you're a home builder. Okay? So if you build a segmentation framework like this, that allows you to go very, very granular, and it allows you to obviously use any combination of these lenses to really find micro segments that you can target with the right message at the right time. And we didn't do this just because it was fun or intellectually interesting. It was because it worked. When we put this segmentation framework in place, the campaigns that were used with the segmentation framework had a double ROI, 11x improvement in likelihood to buy, and they tripled email engagement. Okay? So that's an example of how we use behavioral data in a pretty traditional setting to really drive results. And this was at a huge scale. This company had 75 million households in their database. Since the last couple of years, obviously, a lot more data has become available. And that data is, in many cases, digital. And I think one of the exciting things about digital data is that is the speed at which it becomes available. So you can get actually data in the hands of decision makers very, very quickly. Here's an example of a software package from a company called Net Mining we've used a couple of times. And what you're looking at here is a snapshot of a website of a car manufacturer. And the columns here are the different car makes that manufacturer has. And every dot on this page is a visitor. The higher the dot is, the less likely they are to convert. The lower they are, the more likely they are to convert. And in this case, that is asking for a test drive. So if you look at this a little bit more closely, you can actually start some of these bubbles, they start to move real time. So you could look at this side and who's on that side. And you can see that one of them dropped a little bit lower. One of them here jumped from this product to that product. So that probably means that they looked at some content online that suggested that they were interested in product 111. And you can actually click on these bubbles, and you can start to interact with these customers real time. So I think this is a great example not only of a very intuitive data visualization, but also of how real-time data is now enabling marketers to really interact with their customers on a real-time basis. Okay? So those are two very fast examples that talk about who you should talk to, targeting. The next question, or one of the other questions, is does it work? Which is more about effectiveness. So how do I find out what works and what doesn't work? And I could spend probably an hour talking about measurement. I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to talk about another aspect of effectiveness, which is testing. And I think testing is actually really, really exciting. And I'm not the only one. Our founder, David Ogilvy, he was quoted earlier today, he was one of the original Mad Men. He loved testing as well. And I found actually a little clip of him talking about that a number of years ago. Let's look at that. I think the clicker, okay.
Look before you leap. Perhaps the single most important word in the lexicon of advertising is test. Always keep testing. Testing new ideas, new headlines, new levels of spending, new media combinations, new kinds of commercials. Test, test, test. That's why I think everyone should start his advertising career in direct response. Because in direct response you test all the time, and you acquire the habit of testing.
So David loved testing. He actually was a researcher before he started his agency. But the problem in his day was that he had to, whenever he implemented a test, he had to wait 2-3 weeks, if he was lucky, 2-3 months, for the results of that test to come back. That's no longer the case, obviously, in digital. Now we can test real time, we can test at scale, and we can test actually in a really cost-effective way. So testing has become really powerful, and testing allowed us as an agency also to become a lot more experimental. You can try new things out, and you can fail fast, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and you can learn and iterate. Here's an example from a couple of years ago of work we did with TD Ameritrade, which is the national online broker company, one of the biggest spenders in digital media in their category. And we wanted to play around with the landing page to which most of their digital media actually drove. And what we wanted ultimately people to do was click on that orange button that said Apply Online Now, which started the application process for an account. And we were allowed by our client to play around with some of the elements on this page that are on the periphery. Okay, so we had a client login button for which we actually created 3 versions. The one that said client login, the one that said that had no login with something about the offer, and then the one with no login with something about the process. Okay. Then there was a link up there that said visit TD Ameritrade. So we created 3 versions of that. Visit tdameritrade.com, visit our main site, and then we took the link away. With the button, we played around with the copy. Apply online now, open your account, and get started. So 3 versions of that. And then we had an orange, green, and blue version. And then at the bottom, you had the current layout. Then you had a 4-box call to action. And then you had a single rotating banner that only showed one offer every time. Okay? So if you actually combine all these permutations, I think you get about 473 slightly different landing pages. And then we used a multivariate testing technology to display those pages over a period of 2 weeks, I think. And then after 2 weeks, you can choose whichever one performs best. Now, this has become very standard. This was actually quite revolutionary, and we did this a couple of years ago. But most companies are doing this. And our friends like Google actually have made that software even available for free. So very standard, but I still think it's interesting to look at these kinds of experiments and to learn from them. So let's do a little quiz. So one of these pages was the one we started with, and one of these pages was the one that was the optimal page. So who thinks the one on the left performed best? Show me your hands. A couple of people. The one on the right? Okay, most people on the right. And this works every time. It was the one on the left. The one on the left performed better. And why did the one on the left perform better? If you look at these 2 pages, they're actually very, very similar. Okay? Most people think the one on the right performed better because the button is orange. So let's look at what is really different. So yes, the button is orange, but the green one actually works better. And there's a lot of psychology in the use of colors. While orange stands out, it also spells danger. Green is a lot more inviting. The same can be said for the language we use in the button. So apply online now is quite aggressive. Yeah. Get started is a little bit softer. It just gets you started and sort of lures you in. The other one that's interesting is at the bottom. Yeah, this is something we've known for so many for so many years. On the right, you had 4 offers, just cram in as many offers as possible. On the left, you had a single rotating banner. Less is more. And so these are very, very small changes, but the impact of these changes is huge. So in this case, the one on the left had a 15% higher conversion, not click-through, conversion, than the one on the right. And we had a 43-to-1 ROI on the test. So it's always incredible how big a difference these very small changes make. What is also interesting is that if you look at the differences between high and low performance, that you start to see the more of these tests you do, the more of these good old rules are coming back. I read this book like recently, reread it. John Caples' Tested Advertising Methods. Who's read that book? Okay. It was written in 1927, I think, and it was one of the classics about the do's and don'ts in advertising. If you read that book, and if you spent the last 10 years doing digital testing, all of those rules are still valid. And that shouldn't surprise us. That book was almost written 100 years ago. But he wrote about the basic laws of how people process information. And that hasn't really changed. Okay? So I always tell our young creatives, you should know your classics, because there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot to be learned from the old methods. Okay? So that's testing. And then the last question I want to talk about is what do you talk about? So I started off with the question, who should I talk to? That's part of the equation, but what do you talk about is important as well, obviously. And that's all about being relevant and trying to find out what makes your customers tick, getting underneath their skin, trying to understand their needs and their wants. And there's a lot of data available for that as well. And a lot of that data, the good news is free. So a lot of people are doing social listening today, and listening is very, very easy. Most people in this room will probably be using, packages like Radian 6 or other listening software. Very few people I've seen actually really successfully act upon what they found out when they're listening across social platforms. Here's a really interesting example of one of our clients, the Caesars Group. So they own most of the hotels on the Las Vegas Strip and also the Harrah's hotels. It's very much a data-driven company. In fact, Tom, who you're going to hear from next, wrote about them in his first book. Very data-driven company. They really believe in this. We worked with them to really understand what people liked about the different properties in Las Vegas. And so the Paris Hotel was one of them. And we actually looked at TripAdvisor. The data's out there, people are writing reviews, so we just basically looked at all the data that's on TripAdvisor, and I could tell you that we used a very sophisticated text mining algorithm, but we didn't. We just read the reviews and we classified them. Sometimes just using your brain still works. And we basically saw what people liked about the hotel. And sure, they liked the food or the rooms, but the thing that came out was that they liked the views. And not just any view, it was the views of the fountains of the Bellagio across the street, which is not... It's not a Harrah's company, or a Caesars company. So we sent a photography crew to the parking lot of the Bellagio, took a picture of Paris with the fountains in the picture, and we changed the search copy from rooms from $79 a night to rooms with fountain view shows. And just doing those small things increased the return on ad spend by 30%. So this is a great example of just using everybody talks about big data and the volumes of data. Sometimes it's just about using the little pieces of information that are at your fingertips and just acting upon them. Another free data source that is great is search data. What you're seeing here is actually a mom's journey all the way from the prenatal stage to the toddler stage. And in the middle, you see all the questions moms are asking on search engines throughout that journey. So what we did was we looked at these questions and we mapped them out across the entire journey, all the way from the first question, am I pregnant, to some of the very last questions, is he happy, is he ready for school, etc. Now that data is incredibly rich because we mapped it to, at the top, mom stages, and at the bottom, the baby stages. The stage the baby goes through. And this becomes like an incredibly powerful tool for developing a content calendar, for deciding what piece of content a mom should get at which piece of time. A very powerful planning tool. Again, using data that is out there and that is free. Okay? And all of this is obviously about really getting to know your customers and really getting to know what makes them change. This was a study that was done by Binet and Field of the IPA database in the UK, and it showed that campaigns that were emotional outperformed campaigns that were both emotional and rational, and definitely campaigns that were more rational. So a lot of this is also about using data to uncover the emotions that will really make your customers act, because emotions are an incredibly powerful driver of behavior. And so what I'm going to talk to you, show you now, which is the last case study, is some work we've done with British Airways very, very recently that really played on that emotional angle. But it actually started with data analysis, very, very rational. So we analyzed the 1,400 and plus routes BA actually flies to from New York and from the US. So there's 1,400 routes, and we did a pretty basic quantitative analysis that looked at competitive pressure, it looked at where the market is going, it looked at BA's performance, and one of the markets that really stood out was actually India. And India had a huge opportunity because of the volume of expats that are living in the US. But BA wasn't really capturing its fair share of the Indian expat market. When we actually did some research, we found that BA was outperformed by pretty much any Eastern airline, and also by most of the Western airlines as well. And what the research actually said was that British Airways was not connecting with the culture of India, and was not connecting with the consumer in a culturally relevant way. So that was a big problem. So we tackled that issue. So we went to the pub with the creatives, and I remember sitting actually at this chair, I think it was, with our creative director, and we were talking about, okay, well, what can actually incite people to move from to fly from New York back home to India? And we said, I asked Alfonso, who's our creative director, what makes you homesick? And he said, really, what makes me homesick is food and my mom. So that was sort of the genesis of the idea for the campaign, and it was to use Indian moms and their home cooking to kind of invite their sons back home. And this is very appropriate for Mother's Day. And this is the moment where I'm going to try and make you cry, because we made a video, and it's a 5-minute video, so I'm sorry I'm going to go 1 minute over, but I've tried to cut down this video, and whenever I do it, it just doesn't work. So you're going to have to watch this video over 5 minutes, and I'll tell you what happened, okay?
My name is Ratnesh. I'm originally from Mumbai. I like to call it Bombay because I grew up there. What do I remember from Bombay? Well, playing in the streets, taking the local jasmine gajras in the flower market, and my mother praying in the morning. You can move thousands of miles away, but these images, they are always with you.
I'm Alka. My full name is Alka Rani Dubey. I'm 61 years old. My son is Ratnesh. He is staying in New York. First, when he told me he wanted to go to the US, I felt very excited. But when the moment came when he was leaving India, that time I was really very nervous and quite heartbroken, I must say. Today, British Airways has given me a seat on a plane. It is for my son's favorite dish, okra paratha. They will fly it to America and surprise him in his apartment. I think this will make him come home and visit his mummy. I, like every mother does, I used to experiment with different things, putting in his tiffin box. Most of the time, the other vegetables, they will return from the school untouched. But whenever I am giving okra, it is finished. I asked him, why you like okra the most? He said, Mama, my teacher has told the child who eats okra becomes best in his mathematics. My son is progressing day by day. His dreams are getting fulfilled. And his happiness is more than what I ever want for him. When he will look at the tiffin box, first he will think from where has it come, but once he tastes the food, he will know it is made by his mummy. and I am sure he will start searching for me in his apartment. I miss him so much because when he left home, he was hardly 17 years old. And from that day, he did not return home. I miss my son.
My mom had cooked my favorite meal, and she was waiting for someone from British Airways to pick up the tiffin carrier. So they sent me. After flying from New York to Mumbai, there I was, walking to her door, smelling her cooking. It was an incredible feeling. Sometimes, even when you know what's going to happen, you cannot even imagine how it's going to be. I got the opportunity to see my mother in a way I'd never seen her before. She looked lonely. She looked like she sounds over the phone. I just wanted to run out and give her a hug.
Mommy, I'm here. It was a great moment. It was a family moment. Even his dad was there. We all three of us sat, we talked, and I didn't ask him, when are you leaving? I said, I will not ask you today. Let this question be for tomorrow.
So this. Any tears? I admit I cried. I'm an expat, so I cried, and the client was an expat as well, so he cried. So that was good. But this was a piece of video, 5 minutes, very unconventional format. And all we did was no media. We put it online. The employees of Ogilvy put it online and let it run. And within 2 weeks, we had 1 million views. And if you look at the comments on YouTube, it really hit something with the Indian expat community. It was pretty incredible. 23 million Twitter impressions, but views and impressions don't really matter. What matters is sales. We had 65% year-over-year sales to India on BA.com and 75% through their online travel agents. I mean, that's remarkable. So that 59,000 incremental passengers and worth more than 13 million pounds in revenue without any media budget behind it. So this is just an example, I think, of for all the data you have, it's still what you do with the data, and sometimes data can point you into the direction of a very emotional solution to a communications problem, and emotions can be very, very powerful. Okay, thank you very much.